It is now my pleasure to welcome John Wall of Cummins and Rob McHenry of PARC for a conversation on innovation with me, not Steve Cummins, those of you who are waiting for that. Steve, unfortunately, got called away just a few minutes ago. John Wall is Vice President and Chief Technology Officer of Cummins, the world's largest independent manufacturer of diesel engines. He's responsible for Cummins' global research and engineering organizations, technology strategy, and innovation. His work at Cummins includes emissions research, advanced engine engineering, and technology planning. Prior to joining Cummins in 1986, John led diesel and aviation fuels research at Chevron. Joining John will be Rob McHenry, Vice President of Public Sector Operations for PARC. He leads the integrated operations of all government-related activities across PARC. Prior to PARC, Rob was a program manager at the DARPA Tactical Technology Office, where he led large-scale technology system development and demonstration programs. He began his career as a nuclear submarine officer in the US Navy. Please join me in welcoming John and Rob to the stage. Hey, guys. Let's have a chat. We'll talk about innovation. And thank you both for being here. We're the lead-in now to launch, which shouldn't dissuade us, but we're also the lead-in to the second session of the summit showcase downstairs. And so wanted to kind of frame things as everybody goes down there. Food for conversation, food for networking, around a big word, maybe an overused word, innovation. So what is it? Where does it happen? Rob?
So I think innovation requires, fundamentally it's being able to envision a better future. And in order to achieve that, there are two components. There's that moment of insight where you understand what you're going to try to do, what that new future should look like. And I think that is often overemphasized as the definition of innovation. Once you have that insight, then starts the real work, which is the disciplined, hard slog of turning that insight into reality. And as trying to manage the innovation process, that's where most of the focus is how you maintain that discipline and productively take those new ideas and move them into the market and have impact in the world. Mm-hmm.
How about you, John? You've seen it from a lot of sectors.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things I worry about, especially times like this, is innovation is being a bit over-romanticized. It's the big idea, but it's not really just the big idea and you're done. It's all the things you have to do to be able to deliver it. So it's really solving a problem. It's thinking up things that haven't been thought before, but solving problems that haven't been solved before. And it's all that work that goes into making it a reality and creating value that hasn't been created before.
Right. Yeah, the value creation piece. One of my favorite definitions of innovation is people creating value through the implementation of new ideas, right? And it's all those components.
Why didn't I think of that? That's a good definition.
Yeah, that's I stole it from somebody else, so you can have it. It might even be PARC. I'm not sure. Somebody in the Valley. And so as we think about the bigger, broader picture of innovation, where does it happen in your organizations? Right? And how do you, in your various roles, instill that in the organization?
So, I think innovation requires inspiration. And often at PARC, the model that we use is heavy reliance on multidisciplinary teams. It's the juxtaposition of different backgrounds and experience and perspectives that when you mesh those together, sometimes that magic happens, and the innovation, that insight occurs. But then it's also having the processes and the professional support around that process to take those ideas forward. And often, that's an ecosystem, and it's not always the same champions of innovation who are the most insightful, often aren't the same people who are best at assessing those innovations and charting that roadmap that's going to lead it through to the ultimate value in the marketplace.
Yeah. How do you see it happening across the divisions?
I really see that, I think of our sort of research and engineering as a broad spectrum that reaches outside the company and reaches into the universities and national labs. In fact, I'm sure there are a number of people in this room that have been able to collaborate with Cummins over time. And I think one of the things that we bring is problems to be solved. So how do you articulate some of the things that we have to deal with? You know, we were talking earlier, I ride a road bike and I look down at that headset and all the time I'm riding it screaming back, innovate or die. And that's kind of been the story for Cummins for the last 30 years because we're a regulated industry. So meeting emission standards, if you don't innovate to meet the next round of emission standards and don't deliver it in a reliable way into the marketplace, you basically turn out the lights and everybody goes home. So innovate or die isn't just a nice slogan. It's kind of been the way we've been living for some time. And I think that being able to tap into the broader community that are doing research in these areas and then integrate them into products has really been very important for us.
So how do you attract people to your problems? Because I think there's often, again, kind of in the lore that you go after the really big, the crazy problem, right? We try to parse, but problems that are really hard they're not always the sexiest of problems when you first frame them, but as you said, you can close the doors if you don't get them solved. How do you frame them? How do you get them out there?
I think if it's not complicated, it's not entertaining. Maybe I'm too much of a mechanical engineer, but I think they're really interesting problems. And so I think having colleagues that agree, and also having people that are multidimensional, that enjoy working together and enjoy that diversity of thought, really focusing on the problem makes a huge difference and adds a lot of value.
And I think, innovation can't be forced, but it can be influenced. And so, when we have a strategic direction, a problem that a corporate partner has identified, then the types of techniques that we use are, a series of seminars to increase the exposure to those hard problems and why they're hard and what the state of the art are. And those are the thoughts that then are thinking through those creative researchers' minds as they're, you have those quiet moments in the day when those insights occur. And then we pose hard challenge questions. It's often the role that a corporate partner, is validating that end value for that problem. There's a saying that it's more important to solve the right problem than to solve the problem right. And we spend a lot of time trying to validate very early in the process that we are on the right track through validation from market partners. Often the ARPA-E solicitations can serve that purpose because you guys do a good job sort of systematically thinking through the market impact downstream.
I think there's another part of this too, and sometimes it's actually being able to see the big idea through the fog. That it doesn't always emerge in finished form, then all you have to do is go figure out how to beat it into a product. But many times we get insights into the laboratory, and I know it may be a little arcane, but we have a NOx adsorber technology that we've used to control NOx in some of our products. The first time we saw that, it looked like it had an 18% fuel economy disadvantage, and so you could have thrown it away at the time, but it was teaching us about chemistry that we could do in the exhaust that we didn't know that we could do, and so by continuing to work on it and develop it, we created a product. It was not obvious that we were going to get to the end at the very beginning, but there was that nugget of insight that was novel that gave us, so the curiosity and the interest in pursuing it to try to integrate it into the product.
I was just going to say, I think that's a good example of what I think is the hardest part about innovation, which is being able to make that differentiation. I think only in hindsight can you see the difference between stubborn, throwing good money after bad, and that last bit of fortitude that gets the innovation through to the market.
No, absolutely. The story always gets better in hindsight, right? That's the way it always goes. So I think to the audience here, though, everybody's going to go downstairs, and everybody's got their own technology booths. They're looking for partners, they're looking for funding, they're looking for scale up. How does it happen that you get together with folks to understand their problems or parse your own problems? Like you mentioned the challenges, but just again, how to get people engaged with you or others in your industries, when you came from DARPA, Chevron. Again, just useful information for how to find the people that you should be talking to and what should you ask them to make sure you're getting their problems. So you can, stir the pot here.
So at PARC we practice an open innovation model, right? So our business is working with partners and transitioning innovations and technologies into their businesses, and so we deal with that problem head on every day in our operations, and it's really about it takes a tremendous amount of trust. These are long paths, they're challenging paths. You hit these forks in the road, and you have to build that credibility and trust with a partner base. It's I think trying to form a shotgun marriage and a rapid partnership to go push something through, your risk is rising exponentially. And so having those sustained relationships with the experts in the field, the collaborators who can help build around your idea. Because as John said, innovation is rarely birthed as a perfect concept in completeness. You need to combine it with the best ideas from other partners, and then build that ecosystem that's going to allow that pathway to form to the marketplace. And so you have to do a lot of that up front. And when we look for good partners, we look for that technical fit, but we also look for that business model alignment. And you have to understand that value chain and how each entity throughout that whole chain is going to satisfy their mission or goal or whatever is motivating them to participate.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not speed dating. There'll be an element of that when we go downstairs today, I'm sure, and so that's all very exciting. But it is building the partnerships over time, building the trust, building the communication, so that you can really see the transfer of ideas and how they can integrate. Most big innovations, I think, are also integrate into different ideas from different places. It's not just one big thing, then just sort of as a monolith moves out. And so it's also being able to make that crosstalk happen. And we've had relationships with the national labs for 30 years. The whole time we've been doing all the emissions development. And so there are new engineers in Cummins and in the national labs all along, but they've had this context of development that really frames up the problems that we're trying to solve and sort of directs the innovation in a way that's useful to us.
Yeah. Well, I know both of your organizations have folks here on the ground. And so is the role of their being here to start those relationships with people you may not know? And so, how would you I don't want everybody to run up to the foot of the stairs at the end of this, but how does it work to start these relationships with some of these folks? What's the right, if somebody's selling something, they're pushing an answer, but they don't know you have a problem yet.
Yes,
so what's the right way to start the conversation?
I think you start by the problem you're trying to solve.
Absolutely.
If you come and open a conversation that I have a solution for X, and that is a compelling problem that we understand and we feel that we are knowledgeable about and in a position to act on, then that's usually the basis of a good conversation. If it's I have this widget and I don't know what it does, those usually don't go very far.
Yeah. I also find that folks who've been in various places, like your connections back through DARPA, through the oil and gas industry, to be willing to refer people to where that may still be a problem. And how do you view the role of the larger corporations in that part of the ecosystem?
Yeah, so part of building these open innovation relationships with our corporate clients is being a solution provider, and PARC does not always have the best solution, especially in today's world. It's true, Cheryl. I know it's true.
That's not what Ursula said. That you guys always have the right answer. That's
we usually have a strong opinion, but not always the right answer. But so sometimes the right solution for our customer, for our partner, our strategic partner in these relationships, is to bring them the set of other people who can solve their problem. And that ultimately builds our relationships in that ecosystem. So the next problem where we do have a better technical fit, we have that relationship formed, and it demonstrates the value to our end customers that they're looking for, solving those problems.
Well, it demonstrates the honesty in the relationship, right? Yeah. That you're not trying to force fit pieces and you're playing for the long game.
It's all about the network. But I think there's another element of this is being receptive to the new ideas and giving them an opportunity to add value in a way that you might not have anticipated. So it's always nice to have the conversation.
Right. No, absolutely. So a part of this, of course, is you all can say that it's open and we're doing all these things, but the whole organization has to be willing to be the sponge for ideas and the sharer. How do you create the culture in an organization that really is willing to embrace ideas, right? Not invented here or, disproving the new idea. It can happen, right? I mean, I think all technical organizations grapple with it, large and small. So how do you guys in your organization embrace this?
I think part of it is creating the right environment where you have the freedom or the safety to try new ideas. But I think it really starts with the people and with organizational development, that it's not just walking into a room full of folks and say, think big thoughts and innovate, and it's really okay with me if you do that. It's really having the right people in there. So it comes down to recruiting, to cultivating the people in the organization. If you've got the right people there, the culture will come along. If you don't have the right people, getting the right culture is hopeless.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's maybe two parts to how I'd answer that question. On the internal side, I think there's as much art to science as that. But in the PARC culture, there's a lot of self-selection. The research staff there are primarily motivated by impact in the world. They're not just there for fundamental knowledge. They want their things to go out and have impact. And so their willingness to explore the best solution to combine with their expertise to go down that path and follow it to that impact is the primary driver. And so as long as that's true, I think people are very receptive. They're trying to solve the problem. They'll piece together the best things they can find to go solve that problem. On the partner side, sometimes that's the hardest part of the whole transaction, is having a receptive culture to take innovations that may come from PARC or our ecosystem of partners and move that into their business. And so, our best practices there are, make sure you're talking to the people that understand the end problem, that get the value from new solutions. They're the ones who can see why it's important and can help motivate the resources to be on the recipient side to align to what you're handing off and take it and run with it and complete that movement into the marketplace.
Yeah. So I promised I wouldn't put you guys on the spot, but I do have a question. So what's the last thing that you killed?
Myself.
No, but the whole question, right? Sometimes it doesn't work. And so how does it go when it doesn't work?
Yeah, so when I first went to PARC, one of the first things I focused on was sort of formalizing an early part of that process. So, invention occurs in the lab, and then most researchers' first instinct is to go, okay, I'm going to go, reduce that to practice. I'm going to go do a proof of principle of some sort. And so I inserted within our energy program a market validation stage, which was generally like a month to write a draft, product requirements document and take that out to at least 2 or 3. End consumers of that technology.
People who want it.
And people who validate that they really want it, that our vision of what it is aligns with their need, and that it's differentiated from what else is in the marketplace. And a lot of times the assumptions going into that exercise and coming out were very different, and that terminated some projects. And I was afraid that people would see that as some sort of draconian filter, early in these naked new ideas that should be, cultured. And what I found, the response was quite the opposite, that most of the research staff saw that as, hey, if you can help me prevent wasting a year of my life trying to prove something in the lab that's not going to go anywhere anyway, that's really valuable help. And so we explicitly do that in our process, and we kill a lot of things at that stage if they don't look like they have all those other conditions to complete that innovation process.
Yeah, generally speaking, I want to know enough about something to know that if we stop working on it, it's okay. The competition's not going to come back and kill us with it. And as soon as you know that, then it's all right. I think there's another part that we have to watch out for, and that is, technology is not something to fall in love with. It's okay for me to think my girls are perfect in every way and smarter and more beautiful than anyone else. That's fine. But when you start feeling that way about your technology, then technology is something to be cold about. I mean, really, you understand it, and then you pick the right one for the job. And that's kind of hard to balance sometimes as people get more and more invested in their idea. One of the things people talk about is having a culture where it's okay to fail. I'm actually trying to eliminate the F word from our vocabulary, because failure is not learning something, it is not stopping a project. Failure is continuing to work on it and spend a lot of money after you should have stopped.
Right. Failure to act on what you know, right? That's when it's a failure.
Right.
Yeah, no, we've worked really hard at ARPA-E, the same thing, right? It's not that we stop projects. It's that we stop them when we realize they can't go on. And it'd be a failure to keep going, right? And so I think that's so important, but hard, because that difference between hopeful and hopeless, right, is very gray, right? And at different periods of time.
You really need to rely on, dispassionate third-party assistance, I think. I think that's the way to make sure that you're not, drinking your own Kool-Aid and are unduly biased in loving those technologies. If external people who know that market don't validate the potential, that's a really strong signal that you have to listen to.
Yeah. It is the hardest thing, right? To listen to your data, right? But it does come back to all of us as as database people. You know, I know the culture of open innovation. How has open innovation changed how you think about things with innovation, if at all? Has it just been another facet of it, or?
Yeah, you know, at PARC at least, you know, PARC, you know, it's been our business model for more than a decade. You know, the term open innovation was coined, you know, describing PARC's business model. Yep. And so it's the status quo for us. So there really hasn't been a change in that regard. You know, where I do think the nature of innovation is changing is in the pace of innovation. Mm-hmm. You know, if innovation is about seeing a new future, if that future is changing out from under you at a faster and faster pace, it's harder to have that insight and be able to execute on it before the conditions have changed. Mm-hmm. And so speed is becoming a significant driver and making it more and more challenging to successfully get innovations out into the marketplace.
Right. And into the market.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're experimenting with it, so we're you know, in a bit of a different mode from an innovation standpoint, where we're trying to sort of bring technology in, but where the IP is important. And so we haven't stepped outside the bounds of the company with open innovation yet, but we're using a lot of the tools inside the company. Because with a global organization, with engineers and, you know, researchers that are scattered all around the world, asynchronous communication is pretty important, but I want them to be engaged, and so we are using some of the open innovation tools to connect up our engineers around the world and get a more dynamic exchange on technology going than the ordinary processes we've been using. So the tools have been actually pretty helpful.
Yeah. In that broad process, especially a global process, we chatted about it in the back a little bit, but innovation, when it happens all the way from the inception of idea till it's distilled to a product, right? And the people who do quality control and the scale up of the process, how do you recognize and reward, and at your levels, how do you even know where the innovation is happening in order to be successful, right?
Yeah, it happens along the way. You know, we certainly in our research and engineering organization, we have some recognitions and awards for inventions and to recognize people that have made significant, or groups really, that have made significant contributions over time, to hold that up, not only to recognize them, but to sort of give a stronger signal to the organization that, you know, this is valuable. It gets to be more difficult in the areas where it's trade secret but not patents, because you don't write it down and articulate it and put it in such quite a nice, neat box. And I think that, you know, we certainly rely on the local leaders in our functional groups around to know who is making a significant contribution. You know, we've got a double ladder in the organization of people that are technical experts as opposed to sort of organizational managers and that sort of thing. So there's some mechanisms that we use to try to not only communicate but reward the people that are doing it.
Yeah, and we, you know, similarly, you know, because our end goal, you know, our common vision is impact. You know, we tend to celebrate those projects the most when they've successfully, you know, that initial innovation has transitioned into a market-facing customer. They're at full production. You know, we're getting a royalty stream back. You know, that's when life is good at PARC. And we recognize in order to get there, it's not, you know, obviously it's critically dependent on that researcher who had that first insight, but it's the engineer who, you know, was supporting the factory acceptance test of the new, you know, the new technology in manufacturing is just as important to that whole process. And so when we celebrate those successful projects, it's that end-to-end team that walked it all the way through that process. Right. And so I think that helps, you know, build that common vision of why each of those pieces is important in that end goal. Yeah,
exactly. So if we turn to sort of what you guys are most excited about in energy innovation right now, what are the areas? I mean, ARPA-E is excited about everything, so you're not trying to bias me. But what are you guys excited about? I don't know, John?
I don't know. I've got a pretty long laundry. I mean, of course, I'm an engine guy, so it starts with engine efficiency. But as we start to look out beyond that, so powertrains and power generation in general, the worlds that we're in start to merge a bit. So if I look at hybrid powertrains and I look at microgrids, braking and hills and a hybrid powertrain look a lot like solar and wind and a microgrid. As things are coming and going, you need energy storage, you need to be able to balance that out. So we're looking at, where are there technologies that are common across those platforms, and how do we bring those into our world, either to interface with them or to integrate those into some of the products that we're developing. So I think energy storage is a big deal, the power electronics, and being able to develop both of those in a way that package more easily in commercial vehicles. Putting batteries on a Prius is one thing. Putting batteries on a 80,000-pound line haul truck, you drop that through 1,000 feet. You can either haul the payload or you can haul the batteries, but you can't do both. So trying to find the optimum place where across that product spectrum you got the right mix is very interesting.
Yeah, that's one way of parsing the problem. It's haul the batteries or not. And what do you think, Rob?
That's actually a hard question to answer from PARC, because we have such an active energy research program going on right now. I think there may be two examples that I think are most exciting in my mind. One is the energy-water nexus. I think that is both environmentally and increasingly politically and economically going to become more and more significant. And so, we have a concept that we're developing that is energy-positive wastewater treatment. So to actually get a net energy output out of the treatment of municipal wastewater. That I think is the kind of innovation that sort of hits all the levers of environmentally friendly. It does better remediation of wastewater while also a clean, renewable energy source from the waste streams that we already have to deal with today. So in that area, offsetting the need for power plant water resources for cooling, I think is an important area. I know ARPA-E is doing some work in that area, or starting a program. And then also, so that's a set that I think is very interesting. Also in changing the way that people interact with energy. And this isn't a new thought, right? There's a tremendous amount of activity around. Internally we use the term democratization of energy. Giving the control over that critical energy resource down to the end user, and all the. Just like we saw with the information revolution, the democratization of information, all the new insights and creativity and applications and control that will explode out of that, I don't think we can begin to predict today. Yeah. But I think it's going to be a very exciting time, and that requires new business models, new transaction mechanisms, new control and management systems, new user interfaces. There's a whole wealth of technologies that are going to develop over the next few years to support that.
Yeah. Sort of thinking about the other end of the spectrum too, it may not fit quite into the bounds of ARPA-E the way we think about it immediately, but looking around the world, there are a lot of areas that are still without electricity. Africa is obvious. We do a lot of work in India. Between 300 and 600 million people living without electricity, depending on who's counting. It's a lot, whatever the number is. And so we've done work in that area, looking at biomass gasification or other technologies that would allow us to use renewables more directly for generating electricity on a smaller scale. And that's a domain that might be of interest for us to think about. That's not quite like energy writ large as we do sometimes in the DOE, but as we start looking at some of these technologies, trying to understand how might we be able to apply those for low-cost energy generation where you need 20 kilowatts, not 20 gigawatts.
Yeah. Well, the whole idea of taking what you're expert in and saying where else does it have application, right? In the expertise you have, sounds like a lot of the distillation. And on the side of Xerox and PARC, how much of the effort of PARC is wrapped back into Xerox as a customer? So kind of reflecting a little bit into that piece of what problems we're trying to solve. Yeah, and so PARC was founded originally as a corporate R&D center for Xerox, and so for most of its history, it was focused on supporting and leading to new innovation for the Xerox business units. Today, Xerox constitutes less than half of the work that goes on at PARC, where the other more than half is external. Customer focused, but we still play a critical role, and really we see our mission as creating options. We don't, if everything that PARC does for Xerox is adopted by Xerox, we're not being aggressive enough. We're failing as a research center. We're not creating enough option space for the corporation. But we obviously have a long relationship with them. We see that, we kind of talk about them as our closest corporate client. Yeah.
And we work just like we would with any other client to understand the problems that are important in their business and give them new innovations that create option space for them.
Mm-hmm. Do you see, like, overall in the manufacturing process, which you guys reach both sides out to, do you see a lot of demand for new innovation on the efficiency side? And how are people thinking about that? Is it purely in their processes? I mean, we have a lot of guys downstairs, waste heat. There's a lot of places where energy efficiency means different things to different folks. Mm-hmm. And I think but it is a big area of opportunity.
Yeah, so so PARC does a lot of work in digital manufacturing, mm-hmm. both in the design and management control side and in the the hardware of actual manufacturing processes. And I think the biggest driver, the biggest need statement that we're hearing is really about capital efficiency. It's the ability to using digital manufacturing means apply that same piece of capital to a broader set of end products, mm-hmm. and flexibly reallocate it. That's where I think it's driving all the excitement and investment in renewing our manufacturing base. Yeah. Energy is in the all the economic terms of those manufacturing processes, except for a few niches, isn't the dominant term.
Right.
But I do think there is a lot of potential in that that tailored digital manufacturing to embed more energy efficient products in that process, mm-hmm. especially when you are serving a consumer base that prioritizes that, yeah. or an application that prioritizes that. Yeah. So the ability to you don't have to bias your whole product line to have lower other performance metrics in order to increase efficiency for the whole product line. You might be able to tailor specific products, yeah. using digital manufacturing to do that.
No.
Yeah, we've started to work across a much broader spectrum over the course of the last 6 or 8 years, because we've set some aggressive sustainability targets for the company. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at the energy savings in our manufacturing plants, a lot of that is sort of working smarter. It's improving the processes that we use, importing lower energy consumption technologies. But if you look grossly at Cummins, about 95% of the carbon footprint of our company is people using our products. And so it's not just selling engines that are more efficient, but going out and working with customers, the fleets and the mines, and helping them optimize their operations to understand where they're wasting energy, how could they operate more efficiently. And so there are logistics issues, there are operations issues, there are energy efficiency technologies that all come together in that spectrum. I was stunned to find that in a manufacturing plant, one of the biggest energy losses is leaky air systems, yeah. As you're doing compressed air. So as you start getting into it, there's actually also some low-hanging fruit in some of these areas where it's not a big technology change. It's being able to having some tools that allow you to assess the energy loss and then be able to go after them. So as I'm sitting here talking about diesel engines, I don't want to neglect the building side of this either, because that's been a huge deal for us.
Mm-hmm. Now, well, like you said, it's important to understand where's the pain point, right? Mm-hmm. And until you're in asking those questions, nobody thinks about that. And they certainly don't think about Cummins solving that problem for them at first blush, right? Mm-hmm. And we mentioned it a little bit in earlier comment, but what about as you look at international markets and innovation internationally? How's that dynamic different, right? You talked about using open innovation tools to hook people together, mm-hmm. across regions, but we often talk about U.S. competitiveness. How do you guys think about competitiveness being global players?
Yeah, so we are a global company, right? We partner with the best market-facing partners around the world for that product, and it's interesting, especially when we're working with government sponsors like ARPA-E, because we have to change our thinking a little bit to find those U.S. partners, and so that makes it clear, sort of that those differences. Mm-hmm. All the cultural seams that you find in different companies working together are sort of amplified a level again when you're going across international cultural differences, but you have to understand those differences and you have to work within them. I do think, I may be a little contrarian in this regard, but I do think being together matters.
Yeah, that's the question I was going to ask is, okay, we talk about that, but is it the face-to-face?
We spend a lot of time on planes flying to talk to customers face-to-face because to understand them, those innovations and those relationships are built on the quiet moments on the sides of meetings and discussions, not always in the heart of the formal, back and forth.
Right.
And so, we haven't found that remote relationships build that kind of trust to accept the innovations that we're transitioning into those customers work all that well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, the thing for us is operating globally is innovation is definitely in the eyes of the customer. And so, it's not are you solving a problem, are you solving my problem? So I think we find that if we look at the technologies that we develop for our products globally, the set of technologies are very similar. Mm-hmm. How they're put together in a product locally can be quite different because of the local market economics, because the expectations and durability are different, because the relative costs of operations are different. One thing we find, though, is the relative costs of many things move around. Energy is still a big deal.
Yeah.
And so energy efficiency and being able to deliver more efficient products into the marketplace is always a good thing.
Although it is interesting, an important part of our model is understanding the end user interaction with the technology and the difference in what energy efficiency trade-offs people are willing to accept. Yeah. As the cultural norm for that, I think, varies widely around the world. And so in energy technologies in particular, understanding the market and the end user gets complicated as you go internationally.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know one of the things we emphasize, and obviously you both know, is when we start projects, we actually sit down with the whole team in person, right? And to your point, it's when you say explicitly, I mean this, and you mean, oh, you don't mean square, you mean round, right? And all of a sudden you realize the assumptions we all have from our cultures, from our corporate cultures, our personal backgrounds, and our technical expertise, right? What those differences mean. So it is really important. And part of that's why we have the summit, right? It is the importance of getting everybody together and hopefully establishing those first relationships and having that face-to-face, here, this is my product concept as it exists today, right? And so as we kind of wrap up in the last couple minutes, and I know you both are going to go downstairs on the floor and probably be mobbed by everybody who now knows exactly who you both are. What other words about engaging for true innovation, as we talked about it, to effect, would you want to share?
I think there are two thoughts, and they're in direct contradiction, and I do that intentionally. And one is, you have to let go of the ego associated with innovation. As we talked about, it takes an ecosystem. Very rarely is your idea enough to go all the way. Mm-hmm. It's building that supporting network of other great ideas from other brilliant people that may or may not be in your organization that is necessary to allow you to be successful. And so, accepting a member, role as part of a really successful team is often much more important than trying to be the coach of a team that's not going to go anywhere. In contrast to that, though, it's all about tenacity. It's this long slog of systematically working your innovation through to the market, of understanding the end user, understanding that value chain, mm-hmm. understanding the competitive landscape. That's just all hard work. And so you need tenacity to carry yourself all the way through. So you need to be, proud enough of your invention to carry it through that long, hard road, but not so invested in it that you aren't willing to partner in the right ways to make it successful.
Yeah, so a little schizophrenia is a good thing. Yeah.
That's why it's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. John?
Yeah, well, so to borrow a phrase from Lily Tomlin, talk among yourselves. I think that's the one thing that the engineers from Cummins hear me say over and over again is engineering is a social exercise. And it doesn't just mean we have a whole lot of fun when we're together. We do, but it's how you share our ideas. It's, be curious, be receptive, be open-minded, but most of all, talk among yourselves, because the best ideas are things from, ideas from different people that all come together in a unique way that often we don't understand when it all starts out.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's probably no better way to end this conversation and transition to what we hope is a lot of talking among ourselves downstairs. So please join me in thanking John and Rob for a great conversation. Thank you guys very much. Thanks,